After the French Revolution, taking place in 1789, the French history is kind of a roller coaster ride. There's many ups and downs, there's changeovers in government styles, there's changeovers in people who are running it, and that's where Napoleon comes into play. Napoleon is often compared to some of the world's greatest military generals. He was generally seen as a military genius. He's up there with the likes of Alexander the Great, Hannibal Barca of Carthage, and even Julius Caesar of Rome. He moved very quickly, and he rose to power in only 4 years, from being a simple officer in the French army all the way to dictator of France. We're going to talk about first how he kind of seizes power, takes power into his control and possession. A little bit of his background, not everything about Napoleon. This is a brief history here. But Napoleon Bonaparte was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica. At age 9, his parents sent him into military school in mainland France. In 1785, he finished school and became an artillery lieutenant at the age of 16. When you're thinking artillery, at this time, you're thinking about cannon fire, and controlling battalions of cannon. Napoleon joined into the revolution, the French Revolution, on the side of the new government, so he was opposed to the royalists or against the king. He becomes the hero of the hour and earns himself some fame in 1795 by defending the National Convention delegates against a royalist attack. Then in 1796, the French Directory appointed Napoleon to lead an army against the forces of Austria and also the Kingdom of Sardinia, which is a small island just below his birthplace of Corsica. He fought successful battles in Italy, and he also was asked to lead an expedition into Egypt. One of the big reasons for this is that the British were actually controlling parts of Egypt. They're trying to establish trade routes through what is now the Suez Canal, so on and so forth. So the French were trying to disrupt trade between British and India. The results in Egypt, though, they were really not very good for Napoleon. He lost a naval battle to the British, and then his army was halted in Egypt. These are rare events for Napoleon. Despite his unsuccessful expedition and campaign, he was really good at keeping stories of his setbacks out of newspapers. He was great at censoring the press, we could say. And so he thus remained a hero to the French people back home. Then there is the terminology coup d'etat. And the coup d'etat that Napoleon was involved with happened in 1799. When he returns from Egypt, he's really ready to seize political power. In 1799, the French government system run by the Directory had really lost control of the overall situation. Napoleon, through military force and threat, took over France as dictator. This is known as a coup d'etat. A coup d'etat is a sudden seizure of power, often or most likely through military force. We know that Napoleon had the backing of the military, and so he's going to use that to his advantage. In 1799, though, there's some other countries that don't really like this. Great Britain, Austria, Russia, they joined forces to try and drive Napoleon from power. Through war and diplomacy, this all led to peaceful agreements among all three of those countries with France in 1802. Napoleon could now focus on restoring political and governing order in France. So what we're going to take a look at next are some of his political moves outside the realm of military. He drafts a new constitution, and then he ratifies that constitution with a plebiscite. It's a vote of the people, which was held in 1800 to approve a new constitution. The people voted in favor of this constitution, which gave Napoleon all power and what they called it as first consul. So going kind of back to the Roman ideology of a republic. He then focuses on restoring order at home. He tried to actually continue a lot of what the revolution had established. His first goal, though, was to fix the economy. He does this in two major ways. Number one, he wants to actually collect taxes, making sure that that system is working, and creating a national banking system. He also wants to make the government run more efficient by ending corruption. So he wants two things that he focused on: getting rid of tax fraud and tax evasion. Those are two big ideologies that he has to get out of government. And this is a long-standing tradition in France, going back to the first and second statesmen who don't want to pay taxes. He then puts together a government-run public school system called the lycées. These are government-run schools or funded schools that were open to male students of all backgrounds. Unfortunately, this was not extended to females. Napoleon also ended problems with the church and the state in France by agreeing to a concordat with Pope Pius VII. A concordat is an agreement. The agreement basically stems back from when the French government took over church lands and sold them off. There was a lot of animosity that needed to be bridged together. This Concordat sort of bridged that at that point. Then he also put together a Napoleonic Code. This is a system of laws that restricted freedom of speech, individual rights, but also restored slavery in the French Caribbean. So this Napoleonic Code is a little bit outside of Enlightenment ideas. This is more of a concept of Hobbes and absolute power, more so than it is giving individual rights and freedoms to the people. Then Napoleon is crowned emperor. Actually, he crowned himself emperor, but Napoleon decided to make himself emperor in 1804. This happened at the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. Basically, he, in the ceremony, takes the crown out of the Pope's hands and places it on his own head, which signified that he had more power than the Pope and the Church. So it's kind of a power move for him, but it was another reason that caused the Church to have a little bit of animosity with him and France. Then, to close off the lesson, we'll talk about how Napoleon creates an empire. To create the empire in Europe, he had to cut ties with his American territories. At first, he wanted to secure the French colonies in the Americas, such as Louisiana, French Guiana, the French West Indies. One of the most important islands was Haiti, which was a slave-run, sugar-producing colony. Haiti's people, though, during the Enlightenment and the French Revolution, they demanded the same treatment and rights as the French people had gained during the Revolution. Slaves in Haiti, led by Toussaint L'Ouverture, they rebelled and they won their freedom. These events are what caused Napoleon to sort of rethink his strategy in the Americas. He decided to sell the Louisiana Territory in 1803 to the United States. President Jefferson bought that land for $15 million. Here's a couple of reasons why Napoleon sold it. Number one, he wants money to finance operations back in Europe. And then number two, he actually wants to make the United States stronger so that they could become another buffer zone to Great Britain. One of his big goals was eventually to invade Great Britain. Capital B is now going to focus on Europe. Napoleon had taken Austrian Netherlands, parts of Italy, and also Switzerland by military force. This angers Great Britain, Russia, Austria, and Sweden into a state that they form an alliance against France again. However, Napoleon, using military power, would defeat their forces time and time again, for example, at the Battle of Austerlitz. Napoleon forced the rulers of all but Britain to sign peaceful agreements here. This gave France the largest empire since that of the Romans in Europe. Then we had a major loss for Napoleon. It's called the Battle of Trafalgar. It was Napoleon's, I would say actually it's one of Napoleon's major losses because, he's going to lose at Waterloo later. But the Battle of Trafalgar was actually a naval battle that took place in 1805 near the Strait of Gibraltar, and it had a major impact on France because the British win and it ensured their supremacy on the seas. And because a lot of the French Navy was destroyed, it meant that Napoleon was going to have to come up with a new plan for invading England. Always remember, England is an island nation, and so he's left without a navy, which means that that's pretty much impossible. The French Empire can be examined on page 667. Please note that France now had control of almost all of Europe at this time, except for Great Britain, Portugal, Sweden, and on the eastern side, the Ottoman Empire. Everything else, France is pretty much in control. Let's take a look at a key map here of what we're sort of talking about. Now, this map kind of talks about something that's going to come into section 4 here when he invades Russia. But you can take a look at this purple region here. These are the areas that the French Empire controlled. And then you also have the lighter purple, which are areas that Napoleon had controlled and conquered. You'll see the red starbursts are basically French victories, whereas the white starbursts, like this one here at Leipzig, these are losses. Okay, these are losses for the French. Down here, it gives you a little look at the Battle of Austerlitz, okay, which Napoleon made some pretty good flanking maneuvers. And then here's what happened at the Battle of Trafalgar. Here's where it is, right here near the Strait of Gibraltar. Okay, so you've got a little bit of geographical map here. It'll show you exactly what we've been talking about in this lesson. Here also is the island of Corsica. This is where Napoleon was born, okay? And then this is mainland France right here.